So, what is the best case scenario for Republicans when it comes to the gubernatorial elections? We will find out in just a minute. But before we do, please consider subscribing if you are new. If you haven't already, leave a like on this video and share with as many people as you can. I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers by the November midterms. We are so close to almost 400. So, again, please consider subscribing. It would be greatly appreciated. Now, as I was saying, this is a best case scenario for Republicans in the gubernatorial elections. How many of these states do we think Republicans can get? Well, it's quite a few, okay? So let's just start off. I'm going to fill in safe states for both parties. This will look generally how we've seen in most predictions, but it'll be a little bit different with a few cases where some of the seats that you wouldn't expect to be safe will be safe for Republicans. Very few will be safe for Democrats. Now, this is the entirety of the safe states and then two likely states that I already started filling in, so I thought I may as well finish it. Put in the last likely state for Democrats. That is the last one. Now, moving on, we will do the rest of these states. We'll go through some of these states bit by bit. It's not too important to do each one, but certain ones we'll talk about. So, Wisconsin. Starting off, we have Michaels versus Tony Evers. Evers has a 0.2 lead in the polls, one of them being a CNN and one of them being Marquette, and they're being a fair bit older polls at this point. The most recent polls right here, a Data for Progress and a Fox News poll, these two being but much more recent with the current trends and how much the generic ballot has trended to the right recently. I'd say these polls are a little more accurate, and even then, considering how much polls underestimate the GOP in the state, realistically, Michaels has probably about 4.5, which is what I think is going to happen in the first place. Now, if we do this based on best case scenario, I could see it going into a likely margin upwards of 5+ points, probably around 6 to 8. I'd say 6 to 8 probably is the best case, 8 being the absolute best, 6 being a little more realistic. Moving on from Wisconsin, we have Arizona. This one's pretty easy. Lake's leading in pretty much all of them, except for two polls here, where they're tied in one, and then a much older poll from a pollster I've never actually heard of that has Hobbs ahead by 1. So it's an outlier. It should probably just be tossed out anyway. The rest of them have it much better for Lake. And even this one, which a registered voter poll here, could toss that one. Registered voters are dumb. And then this Fox 10 Insider Advantage poll has Lake ahead by 11, which I think might be a little bit of a stretch, but not completely unrealistic. And if you consider that the GOP is usually underestimated, Lake is leading by about 4 something in the polls. Realistically, end of the day, I'd say likely is probably a safe bet. Again, best case scenario, I would say about 7 to 8 points. I think 7 points being the most realistic in this case. Moving on, we have the state of Nevada. This one's pretty easy. Lombardo's leading pretty much all of them except for this one outlier poll here and this one. This is a garbage poll. It may as well just be thrown out. Makes no sense when every other poll shows otherwise. It's going to be a little bit of a close race. And at this point, it's probably about a dead heat because this is one of the few states that Republicans usually are a little overestimated in. However, there was a recent poll that came out of Rasmussen, I believe. Not Rasmussen. It was Emerson, which was one of the few states that actually polled the state of Nevada correctly since 2016. And they only polled in the Senate race, but they had Laxalt leading by about 5. And Lombardo generally, I believe, has been out polling Laxalt consistently. So realistically, I would say if that poll is accurate, I would put Nevada in the likely column, just barely. I'd say about 5 points, probably just on the edge of 5 points. Now, moving on, we have the state of Oregon. This one's pretty easy. Like, Drazen will win it. Only in lean margin. I don't think it'd be much more than maybe 3 points. It could be a little more, but at the end of the day, I'd say about 3 points. Either way, I'd say it's almost a guaranteed flip for the Republicans. Kotek is not going to win it. The Johnson splitting the vote on the left helps a lot there. But again, overall, Drazen's just been leading for quite a while at this point. I just don't see it likely where she doesn't win it. Now, moving on from the state of Oregon, We have Michigan. This one has gotten much closer as of lately, with Whitmer leading by only 3.4 points, with a few polls that are fairly close, and then this really big gap from Detroit News and WDIV TV. This race has gotten much closer, and Tudor Dixon has made it competitive. I think she actually picks it up. RCP also projects it as a pickup because, as you can see, polls underestimate the GOP by about 4.4 points in the state, actually giving Dixon a bit of a lead. And at the end of the day, I think she does win it in a lean margin by about 3 points in the best case scenario. Now we have the state of Minnesota. This one probably will not be a GOP pickup. Realistically, it won't be. Now, best case scenario, I could see it happening. It will be close, but I do think Republicans can pick it up in a tilt margin. Again, very close, but it is doable. Now we have Pennsylvania. The polling, I'm going to be honest, this is bad polling. I don't see this being the case no matter what. I still think Republicans actually pick up the state no matter what. Polling is always underestimated Republicans here. I'd say it's actually much worse than this. It underestimates more. They were really off with the polling in 2020 and 2016 in the state. Josh Shapiro also massively underperforms polling that he gets. Like, he just does way worse, and Mastriano has outperformed most polling that he's done in the past. So realistically, at the end of the day, I don't see Shapiro even winning it normally. Now, in best case scenario, I actually see Mastriano winning it by about 4 points. A bit of a stretch, but I think it is realistically very possible if it is best case. Now we have state of New York. This could very well be a flip. My latest video was on this. It was a New York video just kind of breaking down what's going on in the state. I do think it could flip. I don't think it's a guarantee, but I think it could flip. Now, this is pretty big. Seeing these numbers, this is quite big. Will it flip? In the best case scenario, I actually would have it as a flip in a tilt margin. It'll be close no matter what, even if it happens, which I think it could. It'll be close no matter what. Now, moving on from the state of New York, I'm not going to bother with Georgia. That's easily safe. Florida safe. Texas safe. New Mexico, Ron Chetty versus Lujan Grisham. I do still think Ron Chetty wins this. Barely. Like, he'll barely win it if he does win it. Now, when it comes to best case scenario, I think he wins it by about 2 points. 2, maybe 3 points. End of the day, when it comes to the actual prediction, I say he wins it by probably at best 0.5. Not much more. Not much less. Now, moving on from the state of New Mexico, we only have a couple left. That being the state of Colorado and Maine. Colorado, currently, polling quite well there. It is likely Dem. I would agree. Probably, it will be a Dem hold. Unfortunately, I don't think Republicans can flip it. There's been some polls that have had it close, but at the end of the day, Polis does very well with independents, and Republicans they won't be able to get close in the state of Colorado. Again, he's fairly popular, so likely, maybe lean in best case scenario. Like I said, Republicans really massively outperform the polls, and there's just that big of an error, which there could be. There very well could be. But I don't think there will be that big of an error. And then the last state being Maine. We look at Maine. As you can see, it was close in some polls, and then some polls recently have had it a little further. There hasn't been a whole lot of polling out of the state in general, however. I could see LePage get closer. I saw some polls that are not currently listed here that showed it a fair bit closer of a race, and the margins being a little closer with the polls, I think, over polling Janet Mills' support. I do think LePage could potentially win it, and in best case scenario, I actually do have him winning it, albeit in a tilt margin as well, just like New York and Minnesota, if either of those states manage to flip. Although, New York and Minnesota are both more likely, I think, at least at this moment, I'd say, than Maine based on the polling we've seen. Now, again, like I said, there has not been a whole lot of polling out of this state, so we don't really know for sure what's going on there. So at the end of the day, best case scenario, I'd say this is what Republicans can hope to achieve if they outperform the polls. The polls are just that far off, which they very well could be. And overall, The Democrats just don't turn out to vote as much as they think, as the left thinks they will, as Democrats think the voters are. A lot of early voting trends have showed that Democrats are actually underperforming, and early voting is just not as high as they expected, so that very well has an impact. And then we already know election day voters tend to break quite a bit more for Republicans, so that will favor Republicans, and even then, Republicans are doing quite well in early voting. So, assuming these trends all come together, the polling continues to get better and better for Republicans, which it seems to just consistently be doing. I very well do think this is the best case scenario for Republicans when it comes to the governorships. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Like I said, I'm trying to get to 500 by the midterms. It would be greatly appreciated. Leave a like as well, and let me know in the comments what you think the best case scenario for Republicans are. Anyways, that's all for now. Have a good night.